Bonjour à tous. Hello. For our Algonquin friends, I'll say Kwek Hina. This press conference is being held in Ottawa on Monday, April 14th. With us today are officials to discuss the security of the federal election. There are several of you on stage, so please introduce yourself and your title before speaking. I'm the moderator, Greg Quinn with Market News International. Before we begin, we have an audio safety message. To prevent disruptive and potentially harmful audio feedback incidents that can cause injuries, we remind all in-person participants to keep their earpieces away from microphones at all times. When you aren't using your earpiece, place it face down on the middle of the sticker for this purpose you'll see on the tables. Please consult the cards on the table for guidelines to protect audio feedback incidents. These measures are here to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters, and so we can conduct our business without interruption. Thank you all for your cooperation. I am guessing you might have a few opening remarks. If so, please go ahead. Allez-y.
Good morning. The Cabinet for Communications at the Privy Council Office. I'm joined today by Alan Sutherland, Assistant Secretary to the Cabinet for Machinery of Government and Democratic Institutions at the Privy Council Office, Vanessa Lloyd, Chair of the Security and Intelligence Threats to Election Task Force, Bridget Walsh, Associate Head, Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity, part of the Communications Security Establishment Canada, and Larissa Galadza, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister of the International Security and Political Affairs Branch at Global Affairs Canada. Les personnes suivantes se joignent à nous virtuellement. Greg O'Hayan, Directeur général, Police fédérale, Renseignement de sécurité à la Gendarmerie royale du Canada, et Anam Alvi, dirigeant exécutif, Direction des opérations du Service canadien du renseignement de sécurité. I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Lors de la mise à jour de la semaine dernière, nous avons présenté des renseignements sur une opération d'information ciblant la 45e élection générale sur la plateforme de médias sociaux WeChat. Bien que le groupe d'experts ait déterminé que l'activité factice coordonnée ne mine pas la capacité du Canada à tenir des élections libres et équitables, il demeure important pour les Canadiens de comprendre les tactiques de manipulation utilisées en ligne par des acteurs étrangers. Today, in addition to our weekly updates, I'll be discussing the importance of vigilance as we head into a period of increased political discourse. My colleague, Bridget Walsh, will also be sharing information on phishing, hacks, and leaks. The panel of the Critical Election Incident Public Protocol continues to meet and receive briefings from the Security and Intelligence Threats to Election Task Force, also known as SITE. At this time, the panel has not found any incidents that have impacted Canada's ability to have a free and fair election. Il n'y a pas eu de séances d'information sur de nouveaux sujets à l'intention des partis politiques au cours de la dernière semaine, étant donné qu'il n'y a rien eu d'important à signaler. This week will be a particularly heightened time for political attention as the party leaders will participate in debates on Wednesday and Thursday. The leaders' debates are vitally important for our democratic process. It's a time for Canadians to discuss the issues that matter the most to them and understand the priorities of each candidate. We anticipate, based on past years, that there will be significant online activity during this time. In 2021, the leaders' debates took place on September 8th and 9th. Those days saw exceptionally concentrated discussion of Canadian politics in both languages, particularly on Twitter, which is now known as X. Pour le débat en français et en anglais, il y a eu plus d'activités politiques sur Twitter ces jours-là que le jour de l'élection elle-même. Nous observons des tendances similaires à l'échelle internationale. Il y a eu une activité accrue en ligne autour des débats des chefs. La plus grande part de cette activité correspond au discours public légitime qui est au cœur du processus démocratique. But in some cases, election debates have been subject to false claims that were circulated widely. For example, in September 2024, a post on X falsely claimed that one presidential candidate in the United States wore an earpiece during the debate. That post gained 8 million views, and the story spread up to Facebook and was shared thousands of times. This is what we call disinformation, which is false information that is deliberately intended to mislead the reader. The general purpose of threat actors using disinformation tools is to disrupt, sow discord, undermine trust in democracy, and influence public opinion and voter decisions. Ils peuvent le faire en tentant de promouvoir ou de supprimer certains idiots, de discréditer des personnes, des institutions ou même des sources d'informations crédibles, d'amplifier les divisions sociales ou de manipuler secrètement l'information en ligne. Sometimes threat actors spread disinformation to support a specific agenda, such as the Kremlin's use of disinformation in the invasion of Ukraine. Other times, the goal is to amplify divisions in our society by stirring up hot-button issues. If enough people react to a post, the disinformation takes on a life of its own. The increased levels of political content and heightened time of political interest around the leaders' debates is an opportunity for malign actors to take advantage, manipulate information, and spread disinformation. Malign actors can use multiple tools to do this, including deepfakes or misleading visual and audio, fake accounts and bots to inauthentically amplify content, manipulating algorithms, and paying social influencers to spread the disinformation. Par exemple, le cas dont nous avons parlé la semaine dernière concernant WeChat a montré comment l'information peut être amplifiée de manière coordonnée et factice dans le but de façonner et d'influencer les publics. The online space is particularly vulnerable to disinformation, as many of the most reliable sources of information are absent. This increases the likelihood that Canadians could encounter disinformation that is being shared within their networks, wittingly or unwittingly. À l'approche du débat des chefs de cette semaine, les Canadiens devraient être vigilants à l'égard de l'information qu'ils consomment. Comme il peut être difficile de repérer les cas de manipulation de l'information, nous voulons discuter de certaines des choses à surveiller. Content can be questionable if it provokes an emotional response, particularly with negative or frightening claims, or with bold or extreme statements on a controversial issue. Manipulated information can also contain what is called clickbait, which is purposefully misleading headlines, images, and videos meant to entice you to click on specific links and engage with its content. Il est important de vérifier les sources. Un moyen de le faire consiste à aller chercher sur n'importe quel moteur de recherche bien connu. Vous pouvez également utiliser des outils de vérification des faits pour confirmer la véracité des informations que vous lisez et consulter plusieurs sources pour vous assurer qu'elles correspondent à ce que disent la plupart des experts sur ce sujet. For more of these tips, we encourage Canadians to make use of the tools and resources available on the Democratic Institutions website and CSE's Get Cybersafe website. You can also consult CSIS publications like Foreign Interference NU, which is available in 9 languages. Il est de notre responsabilité commune en tant que société de protéger les principes démocratiques d'intégrité, de transparence, de l'authenticité et de responsabilité. Les représentants du gouvernement du Canada continuent de rencontrer les plateformes de médias sociaux pour échanger de l'information sur les nouveaux enjeux et les encourager à respecter ces principes et à faire respecter les normes communautaires. The online environment, which includes social media, is an important medium for Canadians to consume news, engage in political discussions, and help determine how they want to exercise their voting rights. Le gouvernement continuera de faire sa part pour protéger l'intégrité de l'environnement en ligne et d'informer les Canadiens lorsqu'ils sont la cible de comportements manipulateurs ou coordonnés et factices. Nous continuerons aussi de mobiliser les plateformes pour échanger de l'information concernant les activités en ligne qui pourraient menacer l'intégrité de notre processus démocratique. The panel will continue to meet regularly to be briefed by the site task force. This will be done at least once a week or more often as required. We will continue to safeguard the integrity of this election for all Canadians. I would now like to pass the floor to my colleague Bridget Walsh, who will share information on phishing, hacks, and leaks. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorianne. As members of the site task force, our organizations are constantly monitoring the threat landscape and continue to do so throughout the 45th general election period. The Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity is a part of the Communication Security Establishment Canada, CSE. We are the Government of Canada's Foreign Signals Intelligence Agency. We alert the government to the activities of foreign entities that seek to undermine Canada's national security and prosperity. CSE uses its Foreign Signals Intelligence mandate to contribute intelligence to the SITE task force. Last week, we outlined CSE's assessments of the foreign cyber threat landscape leading up to and during this federal election period. Today, we will explore one of these threats in more detail. During this election, organizations that are part of our democratic process, such as Elections Canada and political parties, will be more susceptible to cyber threats from malicious actors whose goal is to undermine the process and our democracy. Specifically, our assessment is that Canadian politicians and political parties are likely to be targeted by threat actors attempting to hack into their systems, steal information, and leak that information, known as hack and leak operations. It is likely that politicians and political parties will be targeted by convincing, AI-generating phishing emails in an attempt to conduct these types of operations. Social engineering is a technique used to design emails, websites, and online ads to trick even the most security-savvy person into doing something that's not in their best interest, like sharing personal information, clicking on malicious links, or downloading malicious files. Once a threat actor has access to a device or network, they can steal sensitive information that they may choose to publish or threaten to publish with intent to coerce or influence. A widely reported example of a hack and leak operation occurred during the 2024 presidential election in the United States. In the fall of 2024, the U.S. Department of Justice unsealed an indictment that charges Iran-linked threat actors with conspiracy to hack into accounts of current and former U.S. officials, members of the media, non-governmental organizations, and individuals associated with U.S. political campaigns. According to the indictment, the threat actors gained unauthorized access to personal accounts belonging to people associated with a U.S. presidential campaign, stole documents and emails, then leaked the stolen material to members of the media and to another U.S. presidential campaign. The indictment alleges the activity was part of Iran's continuing efforts to stoke discord, erode confidence in the U.S. electoral process, and unlawfully acquire information relating to former and U.S. officials. This compromise and hack and leak operation is an example of a common strategy. Cyber threat actors use social engineering to compromise a target using phishing before leaking the stolen information publicly. Cette opération de compromission, de piratage et divulgation est un exemple d'une stratégie commune. Les auteurs de cybermenaces utilisent le piratage psychologique pour compromettre une cible au moyen de l'hameçonnage avant de divulguer publiquement les renseignements volés. Overall, we assess that AI is making social engineering attacks more personalized, pervasive, and harder to detect. Nation states and other sophisticated cyber threat actors still use phishing emails because they remain highly successful to gain access to victims' networks. A growing number of countries, including but not limited to the People's Republic of China, Russia, and Iran, have incorporated fake or deceptive AI into their online tactics. Generative AI tools enable cyber threat actors to create realistic audio and video content impersonating trusted individuals, or deepfakes. These help establish legitimacy and persuade targets. Cyber threat actors use AI to craft personalized phishing emails with convincing and grammatically correct language that mimics human writing styles, making it harder for recipients to identify and filter phishing attempts. The cyber programs of the PRC, Russia, and Iran remain the greatest strategic cyber threats to Canada during this federal election. The PRC regularly targets Canadian government networks and public officials to acquire information that will advance its strategic, economic, and diplomatic interests and give the PRC government an advantage in China-Canada bilateral relations and commercial matters. In addition to fulfilling PRC intelligence needs, the information collected is also likely used to support the PRC's malign influence and interference activities against Canada's democratic processes and institutions. PRC threat actors very likely support China's actions abroad designed to silence activists, journalists, diaspora communities, and other groups that the PRC views as security threats, with a focus on the PRC's so-called 5 poisons. PRC actors very likely facilitate transnational repression by monitoring and harassing these groups online and tracking them using cyber surveillance. For example, the PRC has been publicly linked to cyber espionage operations against the Uyghur minority group, including members living in Canada, using spear-phishing emails and spyware. Russia's unpredictable cyber program routinely challenges existing norms in cyberspace and furthers Moscow's ambitions to confront and destabilize Canada and our allies. Russia almost certainly views its cyber program as part of a multi-layered strategy to influence and shape the information environment. Russia and pro-Russia non-state actors remain the most aggressive among attributed actors targeting global elections over the last 2 years. Russia and pro-Russia non-state actors have displayed an ability to create bespoke propaganda designed to enhance its virality and political impact on the target state, which we know includes Canada. Iran is a medium sophistication cyber threat actor, yet it remains a highly potent and effective capability for the Iranian regime. We assess that Iran's cyber threat actors continue to be particularly sophisticated in using social engineering and using it to enhance their cyber targeting. Iran's talent in social engineering is almost certainly allows it to leverage relatively low sophistication cyber tools for intelligence gains. Iran almost certainly uses compelling social engineering campaigns to target sources of intelligence and perceived threats to Iranian regime stability. Iranian cyber threat actors are sophisticated in social engineering, particularly because of their ability to create compelling personas, target emotional vulnerabilities, and leverage a target's professional ambitions. Here's how the process works. The threat actors construct false personas on multiple social media sites. A persona interacts with the target, often building trust and relating with shared interests. The threat actors secretly send a malicious link or file and attempt to gain access to the target's device. This process is relatively unsophisticated, can be done by many other medium sophistication cyber threat actors, and is quite successful. Put together, Iran's global coercive cyber operations present a risk to Canada. Iranian threat actors have performed denial of service attacks and accessed government and private networks to encrypt, wipe, and leak data. Iran has developed a network of hacktivist personas and social media channels that exploit these disruptive events to spread the regime's messages and influence the target society while keeping Tehran's official involvement ambiguous and deniable. CSE leverages all aspects of its mandate and partnerships to defend federal networks and systems of importance to the Government of Canada. We, as Canadians, can be assured that CSE is dedicated to tracking foreign cyber threats to Canada and advancing our cybersecurity. Le CSD met à profit tous les aspects de son mandat, ainsi que les partenariats pour défendre les réseaux fédéraux et les systèmes d'importance pour le gouvernement du Canada. Les Canadiennes et Canadiens peuvent avoir l'assurance que le CST est déterminé à surveiller les cybermenaces étrangères pesant sur le Canada et à améliorer la cybersécurité. When it comes to cyber threats to our election, like those outlined here today, preventing them is part of CSE's 24/7 commitment to our nation's security. CSE has briefed political parties, run cybersecurity operations, and regularly publishes advice and guidance for political parties, voters, education authorities, election authorities, vendors, and information on training for democratic institutions. These organizations are encouraged to contact us at any time for more information. You can find these materials, including specific information on how to protect from phishing and social engineering, on a dedicated webpage on the Cyber Center website called Cyber Threats to Elections, which is also linked in your background material today. We as Canadians can work together shoulder to shoulder during this election period to educate ourselves about these threats and increase our resilience, to avoid foreign influence and manipulation, and to freely and confidently cast our vote.
Thank you. Merci beaucoup. Let's head to our questions. I understand, like last week, we have until about 11:45 for questions. So one question, one follow-up. If you're online, please use the raise hand function to indicate you have a question. And we'll start with Jim Bronskill of the Canadian Press.
Good morning. Concerning the debates, your mention of watching closely for any kinds of messages or deceptive material online. Do you have any indication that state-sponsored or state actors are prepared or planning to do anything like this around the Canadian election debates?
Maybe Vanessa, I'll turn that to you.
I don't know if Bridget wants to follow up on any of her comments, but I would start by saying that all of the site members will continue to monitor for any attempts of foreign interference with regards to the activities this week, but on an ongoing basis in terms of this democratic process. We remain committed to transparency on emerging issues with Canadians, and we will continue to communicate with the public as required should any issues of concern emerge.
And maybe I'll add to say that, in looking at the cyber threat landscape globally, we examined the elections that occurred, 151 elections that occurred across the world in the past couple of years. And in that did see that intent by state actors, and in particular, the PRC, Russia, made up the bulk of those cyber threats online to democratic processes that we were able to attribute. Those issues that we saw were in particular the use of artificial intelligence, including things like deep fakes, to promote mis and disinformation.
Yeah, just one additional point. So we have seen around the world that areas of heightened political activity are times when there are times of political vulnerability at the same time. In our discussions with social media platforms, that's one of the messages that they have also shared with us, that they, in their work, in terms of ensuring that their community standards are enforced, pay particular attention to these times of heightened activity. And we have heard explicitly that debates are exactly that sort of time.
In a past briefing, you mentioned the candidate security program and its availability to candidates in the election. Do you have any statistics or indication qualitatively of take-up of the program by candidates?
Yeah, I can take this one. So as you said, the program is in operation now. We are receiving applications from different candidates. In light of the privacy and the sensitivity of those things, we can't give you specific details on it, but just to say that our civil servants are leaning in to ensure that when they get a request that it's processed quickly and that there are already candidates that are receiving services.
Thank you. Next up, Emily Hawes, Globe and Mail.
Hello. I was just wondering, do you have any Canadian-specific issues that foreign interference actors might try and exploit during the debates? Like any like heightened debates in Canada that might be a target or anything to that effect?
It's a great question. Larissa.
I can speak to that. I think that in my opening remarks a month ago now, I spoke a little bit to that. The intent that some foreign actors have to polarize Canadian society, and they do that by engaging on debates that are of particular interest to Canadians. And there's a debate when there's something to be discussed. So issues of immigration would be one area where there is a debate in Canada about how to move forward with immigration in Canada, and there are differing opinions on that. And a foreign actor would see the opportunity to polarize by throwing extreme opinions into the mix on comment pages, and then potentially using the technology that they have to amplify that rapidly, inauthentically, and that sort of the kinds of tactics that we've all talked about over the last 4 weeks.
Maybe just to build on that. So as Larissa said, it's questions where, and one of the things that we've learned about our adversaries during our experience since 2016 on these issues is that the desire to sow doubt, sow confusion really builds on existing cleavages and conflicts within society. So the answer to your question is, where there are cleavages and conflicts within society, you may likely look there to find areas that foreign adversaries may wish to exploit.
And sorry, I was going to say, maybe if I can add in, that's quite consistent with what we've seen globally as well. Yes. That the threat actors are looking in any nation that they're looking to target to pick up on that information that divides.
I'll close just by saying that, as Lorianne mentioned, we do expect this period to be a heightened point of dialogue and attention on Canada around the debates. And certainly all of the site agencies, as you can see by all of us chiming in on this answer, will be monitoring after the debates to ensure that any indications of foreign manipulation of that debate is detected and countered in our efforts to ensure that the election remains free from that foreign interference.
Great, thank you. As well, how would you assess the social media companies' job that they're doing in terms of enforcing their own community standards?
Did you want to start? And then...
So one of the things I'd observe is that in the instances that you've heard before in these tech briefings, that there has been bilateral engagement with the social media platforms, and we're pleased that they followed up with us to have a discussion. And in some cases, they took action consistent with their community standards.
Okay, we will. Yes, okay. Riddhi Kachela, Hill Times.
Thank you so much for answering our questions today. Just following up on that, you mentioned you have been in you've held discussions with social media companies, but could you be a little more specific about the kind of actions they have taken so far? Do they report on number of accounts that they've taken down, or bots that they have discovered and they've acted on, or are there any specific outcomes from these discussions?
So I would suggest you engage directly with the social media platforms on that, on what their activities have been. All I can tell you is that they have taken action, and there has been prompt engagement with us when we've identified a problem.
Thank you. And just on a slightly different note, I was wondering if you've identified any specific people in any specific ridings or any specific regions who you feel are more targeted this election, or are you focusing on any specific ridings that you feel would be more vulnerable to disinformation campaigns?
Are you referring to the candidate security program, or are you referring more generally?
More generally, actually.
Like diaspora communities?
Yeah, especially for diaspora, when it comes to diaspora communities. And, for example, when we know that a certain candidate is running in this riding, this candidate may be more vulnerable or targeted by disinformation campaigns or
Start, and then I'll invite my colleagues to join in. I think, as Bridget outlined today, diaspora communities of China, Iran, Russia are obviously going to be more vulnerable to disinformation and attempts by those countries because we've identified them as threat actors. So that's, I think, the starting point. And then I will reserve Vanessa.
I think I would answer your question this way. So, in order to ensure the integrity of the democratic process, we need to be looking widely based on what we've seen before, which we spoke about in our first tech briefing, and the potential for some of those tactics to be used. And you've heard in these tech briefings a range of tactics that can be used in different venues and methods. So we've spoken about the digital infrastructure, a global ecosystem, and how that can be used for transnational repression. Today, we've spoken about cyber operations last week and again today, and on spear phishing. And I think as opposed to focusing or limiting how we look at what's happening across the country, we are focused on the threat actors and those tactics, as opposed to where there may be more vulnerabilities or making assessments of vulnerabilities, because what we want to be sure we are alert to is the attempts of foreign interference. And I guess I would underline, although those attempts might be common, successful attempts are something entirely different. And so we will continue to have dialogues, in particular with diaspora communities, so communities that are ethnic, religious, and cultural across the country. And I think last week we touched briefly on some of the ways we do that. Lorianne mentioned today that some of the publications are available in up to 9 languages. Last week, Al shared with you that through Public Safety, who is a partner in the site effort, has robust engagement with many communities across the country to be able to have a two-way conversation when they believe that there are instances where they could be subject to foreign interference, and to help equip those communities to be resistant to those attempts.
Thank you. We'll now go to the phones. Christopher Nardi, National Post.
Morning, everyone. And I'm sorry to be a disembodied voice this morning, but thank you again for doing this briefing. My first question has to do with last week's briefing, actually. As you likely saw, there was a lot of talk about the information that was put out, but there was also a fair amount of interpretation by many online that viewed the posts in question on WeChat as China endorsing Mark Carney or promoting the Liberals and Mark Carney, and in a way, I guess, trying to, rig the election, or at the very least push Chinese Canadians to vote for Mr. Carney. How do you view the response to the briefing last week and that specific interpretation that has been circulated decently widely?
Thanks, Chris. So maybe I'll start and I'll turn it to Larissa. So in our briefing, as you know, we cited both positive and negative posts. I think what was and remains important for us is that the Yoli Yomian account is linked to a foreign state, and the information it shared may be used to manipulate. That was what we felt was important to get across. But I'll turn to Larissa and see if there's anything she'd like to add.
I think it's very good that there are multiple nodes of expertise and analysis in Canada who are watching the information space, each from their sort of area of expertise. And as Lorianne has said, our area of expertise is linking online activity pertaining to the election to foreign states where that link exists. And so that was the most important part of last week's brief, is to say that intelligence links the Yuli Yumian account on WeChat to PRC state entities. And so whether it's the articles that were amplified about Prime Minister Carney or anything else, it's important for people consuming information from that account to understand that it may be being used to manipulate Canadians' opinions.
And on a slightly different topic, there was a report last week by the Canadian Digital Media Research Network that talked about those AI-generated videos that we can see sometimes of, that purport to be Mark Carney or Pierre Poilievre, Jagmeet Singh, that were circulating widely on Meta that I believe are meant to really promote some sort of financial scam. Anyways, and these deepfake videos, not just on Meta though, I think anyone with an X account has probably scrolled past innumerable amounts of posts like that. And because you've talked so much about the threat of deepfake and AI-generated content influencing this election, do you have any evidence that those particular, ads or fake scam ads that are flooding Meta and X are state-sponsored, are basically backed by state-sponsored activity, or being pushed as that, or is it unrelated?
Maybe I'll start with Bridget.
Yeah, thanks very much for your question. What we see here is consistent in sort of the cyber threat world with what we see writ large during important events that gain a lot of attention. We see cyber threat actors taking an advantage of an event, in this case an election, to post information online that draws clicks. It convinces a social engineering aspect to it. So it is putting forward an ad or a video or a deep fake that promotes someone and has them click on that link or go, as you say in this instance, purportedly to a website pushing fraud. And so very consistent with what we see writ large. And in this case, taking advantage of the election to push people into those fraud spaces.
D'accord. Nous avons besoin d'une question en français. Si vous placez sur le bouton pour le main jaune, c'est une bonne idée. Before that, we'll turn to Sam Cooper, the Bureau.
Sorry, can you hear me now? I believe you can hear me. Sorry I was muted. Thanks very much for this opportunity. I'm hoping that you can give a message of clarity to the Canadian public. I just want to lay out a few facts. In 2021, we know, because I've read reports, that PRC WeChat disinformation sought to tell the diaspora voters that a vote for Erin O'Toole and the Conservatives would be like a vote for Trump 2.0. The esteemed panel site has already told us very recently that, as my colleague Mr. Nardi laid out, some of the disinformation you have seen was positively promoting Mr. Carney as a strong champion for Canada against aggression from Washington that would seek to make Canada a 51st state. It has just been reported also by some of my colleagues with CBC and the Post, confirmed yesterday, that the Liberal Party of Canada and its war room potentially has been a threat actor to this election in planting confusion and polarizing messages with fake buttons in a Conservative community conference in the past week that would seem to suggest, or actually would suggest, that the Conservatives are part of the cleavage of extremeness in Canada that would be Trump-like and would not trust election results or polling results. I think I've characterized it very accurately. So to the panel, I'm imploring you, can you speak to the Canadians and give them the confidence that you would look at that incident that has been acknowledged, and would you reach out to the Liberal Party and warn them that they have a danger of being a disinformation threat actor, perhaps even seeking to plant those disinformation messages within mainstream Canadian media sources, in this case, exposed by a great reporter, apparently. But my concern is, could you tell Canadians, do you have the capacity to look into that event and see whether there could even have been a crossover from a foreign state actor that would have sought to benefit from a new Canadian government being very strongly against Mr. Trump and seeking to perhaps convince Canadians that a conservative leader would be a Trump 2.0? Thanks very much. Appreciate your response.
Vanessa, maybe I'll start with you.
So let me start this way. National security agencies take any attempt to undermine our democracy really seriously, and we will continue to take action to ensure that Canadians are protected from foreign interference and quite frankly, to ensure that Canada's democracy remains strong. Not all cases of disinformation, are foreign backed. Not all cases where disinformation is foreign backed will be able to be attributed. And the Site Task Force, again, as I said earlier, is committed to come forward to speak plainly to Canadians when we identify emerging issues that can be linked to the foreign state actor. And so I make that distinction between those activities that we are specifically monitoring for, which is the range of activities by the hostile state actors that we have seen try to attempt in previous elections to influence our democratic processes using the tactics that we have shared with Canadians over the last several weeks.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask one more question. It has also been reported that Mr. Carney had appeared with a very prominent Toronto-based Chinese-Canadian Commerce Society, which has documented and proven intercommunications with United Front Work Department entities in Jiangsu province, and rather Jiangsu, I believe, Anhui province. And so the question is, for Mr. Carney appearing in a high-profile Chinese New Year event with very prominent leaders of that Commerce Society that has on its honorary board some Liberal Party members and has, as a past president, a Liberal Party Toronto area riding executive, with those events published on Chinese Canadian media of the Carney meeting with those leaders from the Commerce Group, could that be interpreted within the diaspora as a message that Mr. Carney would be the favored candidate of Beijing? And again, the reports from the Globe and Mail very accurately stated that the message from the websites promoting that meeting with the Jiangsu Commerce Group said that Mr. Carney entering politics was seen as a positive shift for Canada-China relations. Thanks for your response.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. I'll start by reiterating that the efforts by members of the Site Task Force are nonpartisan, and that we are again looking at the activities of foreign state actors as they might affect our democratic processes. So what this means is that the Site Task Force is committed to making sure that we share with all parties recognized in the House of Commons information that is relevant to them in terms of the intents and the activities of those threat actors with regards to this current democratic process that is GE 45. So we will continue to brief parties on potential threats in this regard. And let's go back to what those threats are. The threats that we're monitoring for are the intents of foreign states to clandestinely and deceptively influence our democratic process. The benefit of these tech briefs and all of the information that has been out in the public domain by virtue of the many reviews related to foreign interference means that the Canadian public, individuals and organizations have quite a bit of information with regards to the tactics used by these hostile state actors, including the PRC, as well as how they have attempted to conduct that influence in the past. The best defense against disinformation, and foreign interference is being resilient. That means that individuals, organizations, campaigns, and candidates can use that information to make themselves resilient to attempts for foreign interference. And that really is what we're trying to achieve through all of these tech briefs. And again, I would reiterate that attempts of foreign interference are not the same thing as successful attempts to foreign interference. And so the opening comments that Lorianne made this morning reiterate that we have not seen any attempts of foreign interference that have been successful in that they have compromised at this point in the campaign any ability for Canada to have a free and fair election with regards to any of the candidates or processes that have unfolded so far in the campaign.
Okay, we have time for one last question. Palak Mangat, Parliament Today.
Hi, good morning. I'd like an update on your talks with WeChat last week. How did that talk go? Were there any assurances that you got that the company is working to address your concerns? And if so, what are those assurances?
Great, thanks for the question, Melissa.
Thank you. Thanks for following up on that. Yes, we had a good conversation with Tencent, the parent company of WeChat, and shared with them what we were seeing and had the kind of conversation that we've had with them before and other platforms as well, flagging the content of concern and asking them to evaluate it against their own terms of service, and they undertook to do that. They sought some additional information from us, and we're sharing as much of that information as we can.
And just as a follow-up, maybe for Ms. Galadza as well, we've talked about a spike in online activity expected this week with the national debate. Can you just specify what specifically you're doing, maybe through RRM, to monitor the online space? So, does that mean more people monitoring, a greater workforce for you? And generally, as sort of a double barrel here, we've talked about the national debates, but does SITE also monitor the localized debates? And is there concern that maybe the all candidate debates will be could be subject to interference as well?
I'll answer the first part of that question. So with the Rapid Response Mechanism, Canada has augmented its capacity for the 45th general election. And in the coming week, we will watch, as we have in the last several, for evidence or for activity online that looks inauthentic, that looks manipulated. And when we see that, we will dig deeper to see if there's a connection to a foreign state actor. And if that connection is found, we will discuss, bring it to the attention of the other SITE members. It will be discussed, it will be assessed, and it will be brought to the attention of whoever needs to know about it, including Canadians, as appropriate, as we have been doing for the last few weeks.
Yeah, maybe. Thank you very much for the question. So certainly, as I said earlier, we will be monitoring after the French language and English language debates this week. And your second part of the question was specific with regards to the local level debates. So what I would say there is that the issue of foreign interference really does require a whole of government and whole of society approach. And all Canadians have a role to play in that. In terms of protecting our democratic institutions and these processes. So the Government of Canada has done a lot of effort to educate Canadians, including candidates and the parties, about how foreign state actors might attempt to influence the processes at all levels of government and at all level of political activity. And so what we would encourage candidates involved in those local processes, campaign teams for the parties, as well as the public. If you have concerns that any of those parts that are so important to the democratic debate process in Canada at this time are subject to attempts by a foreign state actor to influence that conversation, please report it to SITE. And the agencies on this panel, and as well as our partners, are committed to investigate those potential occurrences.
Sorry, just to clarify, but is that something?
Sorry.
Oh, sorry,
Yes,
thanks. I just
okay,
want to
that's all
clarify,
the time
is
we have
that
today. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Merci, miigwech.